Before you begin, understand what this book actually is and what it is not. It is not a collection of shortcuts, secret formulas, or guaranteed paths to a specific number in a bank account. Anyone promising that has not been honest with you about how real, lasting success actually gets built. What this book offers instead is something more durable, a set of principles that, applied consistently over time, reshape the way you think, the way you act, and the way you respond to the inevitable difficulties that arise on any meaningful path forward. These principles have shown up, in one form or another, across the lives of people who built extraordinary outcomes in wildly different fields, because the outer results always trace back to the same inner foundation. You will notice that this book does not spend much time discussing specific investment strategies, business tactics, or financial formulas. That is intentional. Tactics change constantly, and any specific strategy popular today may be outdated within a few years. What does not change is the mind required to apply any strategy well, the discipline required to stay consistent when results are slow, the resilience required to recover from inevitable setbacks, and the clarity required to make sound decisions under pressure. Build that foundation first, and you will be equipped to apply whatever specific tactics your particular path requires, adapting as circumstances change around you. As you move through the 10 chapters ahead, resist the temptation to read quickly, simply to finish the book. Each chapter contains practical exercises meant to be applied in your actual daily life, not simply understood intellectually and set aside. Real transformation happens in the gap between reading an idea and actually practicing it repeatedly until it becomes part of who you are. Give yourself permission to move slowly, returning to chapters as needed, applying one principle thoroughly before rushing toward the next. Finally, understand that wherever you are starting from right now, regardless of your current financial circumstances, your past mistakes, or how far away your goals might currently feel, you possess everything necessary to begin this work today. The people who eventually reach extraordinary outcomes were not fundamentally different from you at their own starting point. They simply committed to the daily, unglamorous practice of the principles contained in the pages ahead, and allowed that consistent practice to compound over time into results that, from the outside, look nothing short of remarkable. Your own version of that transformation begins now. Chapter 1. Master your mind before you try to master money. Every person who has ever built real wealth started with the same raw material you have right now. Not a bank account, not a business, not a lucky break. They started with a mind. And before that mind produced a single dollar, it had to be trained, tested, and tamed. This is the truth nobody tells you when you are chasing success. Money is not the first thing you build. Money is the last thing you build. The first thing you build is control over your own thoughts. Think about the moments in your life when you made your worst decisions. Chances are, they did not happen because you lacked information. You knew the gym was good for you and skipped it anyway. You knew the extra spending was unnecessary and bought it anyway. You knew the argument was not worth having and had it anyway. Knowledge was never the problem. Your mind, left unmanaged, was the problem. It pulled you toward comfort, toward instant reward, toward the path of least resistance. And you followed, because nobody taught you how to lead your own thinking, instead of being led by it. The top 1% did not get there because they were smarter than everyone else in the room. In many cases, they were not. What separated them was a decision, made early and repeated daily, to take full ownership of their internal world before trying to control their external results. They understood something simple, but rarely practiced. Your outer life is a direct reflection of your inner discipline. If your mind is scattered, your results will be scattered. If your mind is calm and focused, your actions will be calm and focused. And calm, focused actions compound into extraordinary outcomes over time. Picture two people standing at the exact same starting line. Same education, same starting capital, same opportunities knocking on their door. One person reacts to every emotion that shows up. Frustration leads to a hasty decision. Fear leads to hesitation at the worst possible moment. Boredom leads to distraction. The other person notices the emotion, acknowledges it, and chooses their next action based on their long-term goal, rather than their short-term feeling. 5 years later, these two people are not living in the same world anymore. One is still spinning in circles, blaming bad luck. The other is building something real, brick by brick, because they mastered the one thing that was always within their control: their own mind. This is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending to be a robot. Stoic thinking, the kind practiced by history's most resilient leaders, was never about feeling nothing. It was about feeling everything, and still choosing your response with clarity, instead of letting the feeling choose for you. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, while writing private reminders to himself about staying calm under pressure. He was not naturally unshakable. He trained himself to become that way, one recorded thought at a time. If an emperor needed daily practice to master his mind, what makes you think you can skip that step and jump straight to mastering your finances? Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people spend more time planning their vacation than they spend examining their own thought patterns. They will research flights for 3 hours, but never sit down and ask themselves why they keep sabotaging their own progress. They will read 10 articles about investment strategies, but never read a single page about controlling their impulses. This is backwards. Your mind is the engine that drives every decision you will ever make about money, relationships, health, and purpose. An engine that has never been serviced will eventually break down, no matter how expensive the car around it looks. So how do you actually start mastering your mind? It begins with awareness. You cannot manage what you refuse to notice. Start paying attention to your automatic reactions. When something frustrating happens, notice the first thought that appears before you act on it. That thought is not the truth. It is simply a habit your brain has practiced so many times that it now feels automatic. The moment you can separate yourself from that automatic thought, even for 2 seconds, you have already begun the process of mastery. Those 2 seconds are where your power lives. Everything that separates a reactive life from an intentional one happens inside that tiny gap. A simple daily practice can build this skill faster than you might expect. Each morning, before you check your phone, before the noise of the world floods your attention, spend 10 minutes in complete silence with your own thoughts. Ask yourself what emotion you are carrying into the day. Ask yourself what old pattern you are willing to interrupt today. Write it down if that helps you stay honest. This is not a magic ritual. It is simply a rehearsal space where you practice noticing your mind before the pressure of the day forces you to react without thinking. Another practice that changes everything is delaying your response to triggers. When something upsets you, whether it is a critical email, a disappointing result, or an unexpected expense, train yourself to pause before reacting. Even a full 60 seconds of silence before you respond can be the difference between a decision that moves you forward and one that sets you back months. The people who build lasting wealth are not the ones who never feel triggered. They are the ones who refuse to let a triggered emotion make their decisions for them. Consider how this shows up in the real world of money. A person without mental mastery sees the market drop and panics, selling everything at a loss because fear took the wheel. A person with mental mastery sees the same drop, feels the same fear, but pauses, reviews their long-term plan, and makes a decision based on strategy rather than panic. Same event, same initial emotion, completely different outcome. The difference was never the market. The difference was the mind interpreting the market. This principle extends far beyond investing. Think about spending habits. Impulse purchases rarely come from genuine need. They come from an unmanaged emotional state, usually stress, boredom, or the desire to feel a quick hit of pleasure. When you master your mind, you start noticing the urge before you act on it. You ask yourself a simple question: am I buying this because I actually need it, or am I trying to fill a feeling with a purchase? That single question, repeated consistently, can save you more money over a lifetime than any budgeting app ever will. Mental mastery also transforms how you handle setbacks, and setbacks are guaranteed on any path toward significant success. Every person who has built something meaningful has failed publicly, lost money, been rejected, or been told they were wrong. The difference between those who quit and those who eventually broke through was never the absence of failure. It was how their mind processed that failure. An untrained mind treats failure as proof that you are not capable. A trained mind treats failure as information, a data point that tells you what to adjust before your next attempt. This single shift in interpretation is often the entire distance between giving up and eventually succeeding. Let us talk about self-talk, because the conversation happening inside your head right now, in this very moment, is shaping the person you are becoming. Most people speak to themselves in a way they would never speak to someone they respect. They call themselves lazy after one missed workout. They call themselves a failure after one bad month financially. This internal harshness does not motivate growth. It exhausts you and makes you more likely to quit. Replace that harsh voice with the voice of a strict but fair mentor. A good mentor holds you accountable without tearing you down. Speak to yourself the way that mentor would speak to you, and watch how much easier it becomes to keep showing up. Real-world application matters here, so let us make this practical. For the next 30 days, commit to 3 specific actions. First, begin each morning with 10 minutes of silent reflection, asking yourself what pattern you want to interrupt that day. Second, whenever you feel a strong emotional trigger, whether it is anger, temptation, or fear, pause for 60 seconds before responding or acting. Third, at the end of each day, write down one moment where your mind tried to control you, and one moment where you successfully controlled your mind instead. This simple daily audit builds the muscle of self-awareness faster than almost anything else you can do. You will notice something remarkable happen as you practice this. Decisions that used to feel overwhelming will start to feel manageable. Situations that used to trigger panic will start to trigger calm analysis instead. This is not because your circumstances changed. It is because the instrument interpreting those circumstances, your mind, has become stronger and steadier. Wealth built on top of an unmanaged mind is fragile. It can be lost in a single bad decision made during a moment of panic. Wealth built on top of a mastered mind is durable, because the person holding it has already proven they can handle pressure without falling apart. This durability matters more than it might initially seem, because life rarely tests you only once. It tests you repeatedly, in different forms, at different times, often when you least expect it. A person who has genuinely built mental mastery does not need to relearn how to handle pressure with every new challenge that arrives. They carry forward the same underlying skill, the ability to notice, pause, and choose deliberately, and apply it across whatever new circumstance presents itself. This is precisely why the work of this chapter deserves to come first, before every other principle in this book, because it becomes the stable ground every other skill gets built upon. There is a reason the wealthiest and most respected people throughout history valued discipline of thought above almost everything else. They understood that money amplifies whoever you already are. If you are reckless internally, money will make your recklessness bigger and more expensive. If you are disciplined internally, money will make your discipline more powerful and more far-reaching. This is why chasing money before mastering your mind so often ends in disaster, and why mastering your mind first sets you up to handle money wisely once it arrives. You do not need to wait until your mind feels perfectly calm to start building your life. Nobody achieves perfect calm. What you need is the daily practice of noticing your thoughts, questioning your automatic reactions, and choosing your response deliberately instead of emotionally. This practice, repeated over months and years, becomes the foundation every other part of your success will stand on. Skip this step, and you will spend your life building on sand, watching your progress collapse every time an emotional storm rolls through. Build this step first, and everything else you construct, your career, your finances, your relationships, will stand on solid ground. Right now, in this exact moment, you have a choice. You can close this chapter and go back to letting your mind run on autopilot, reacting to whatever life throws at you. Or you can decide, right here, that today is the day you start paying attention to your own thinking. Not perfectly, not all at once, just one moment of awareness at a time. That is how every person who mastered their mind actually started. They did not wake up one day already disciplined. They practiced noticing, they practiced pausing, and they practiced choosing, again and again, until it became who they were. Your mind built every circumstance you are currently standing in. It will also build whatever comes next. Choose, starting today, to become the one who trains it, rather than the one who is trained by it. That decision alone puts you ahead of the vast majority of people who will spend their entire lives chasing outer results while ignoring the inner work that actually produces them. Master your mind first. Everything else you are chasing will follow from there. There is one more piece of this foundation worth sitting with before you move forward. Mastering your mind is not a single event you complete and then move past. It is closer to physical fitness, something that requires ongoing maintenance rather than a one-time fix. The moment you stop paying attention to your thoughts, old patterns quietly return, because they were never permanently deleted, only overridden through consistent practice. This is not discouraging news. It simply means you can expect the work of noticing, pausing, and choosing to remain part of your life indefinitely. And that expectation removes the frustration people feel when an old reactive habit resurfaces after months of progress. Think about the specific areas of your life where your mind currently runs the show instead of you. For some people it is spending. For others it is procrastination, or the tendency to say yes to things they do not actually want to do, simply to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. Identify your specific pattern honestly, without shame, because shame tends to freeze people rather than motivate them. Simply naming the pattern clearly, out loud or in writing, begins loosening its grip, because patterns thrive in the dark and weaken considerably once they are brought into conscious awareness. Consider also how physical state influences mental control, since the two are far more connected than most people realize. A mind that is exhausted, poorly rested, or running on stress hormones will struggle to exercise the kind of calm, deliberate control this chapter has been describing, regardless of how much willpower you believe you possess. Protecting basic physical foundations, adequate sleep, regular movement, and reasonable nutrition is not separate from mental mastery. It is the physical infrastructure that makes mental mastery possible in the first place. A depleted body will consistently produce a reactive mind, no matter how many mindset techniques you attempt to layer on top of it. Finally, understand that the goal here was never to eliminate difficult emotions from your life. Anger, fear, disappointment, and frustration are part of being human, and a life without them would not be a mastered life. It would be a numb one. The goal is to feel these emotions fully, while still retaining the ability to choose your response deliberately, rather than being dragged into a decision you will later regret. This is the quiet, unglamorous work that precedes every visible achievement you will read about in the chapters ahead, and it deserves your genuine, ongoing attention, not as a one-time lesson, but as a lifelong practice you return to daily. Carry this understanding with you as a kind of quiet confidence rather than a source of pressure. You are not required to master your mind perfectly before moving forward with the rest of this book. You are simply required to begin, to notice one automatic reaction this week that you previously would have missed entirely, and to practice choosing your response even once. That single practiced pause is the seed from which every other principle in this book will eventually grow. Because a mind capable of pausing before reacting is a mind capable of applying every strategy that follows, with genuine consistency. Chapter 2. Build unbreakable focus to silence every daily distraction. There is a quiet war happening in your life every single day, and most people do not even know they are fighting it. It is the war for your attention. Every app on your phone, every notification, every headline, every conversation that does not serve your goals is competing for the most valuable resource you own. Not your money, your attention. Because attention is where your energy flows, and where your energy flows, your results eventually follow. The people who reach the top 1% in any field are not necessarily more talented than everyone else. They have simply won the war for their own attention, more consistently than the people around them. Think about how your average day actually unfolds. You wake up, and within minutes your phone is in your hand. You scroll through messages that are not urgent, opinions that are not yours to solve, and content designed by teams of engineers whose entire job is to keep you scrolling longer than you intended. By the time you sit down to do the one task that actually moves your life forward, your mental energy has already been spent on 100 tiny distractions that gave you nothing in return. This is not a personal failure. This is a designed outcome. Entire industries are built around capturing your focus and selling it to the highest bidder. If you do not defend your attention on purpose, someone else will claim it for you. Focus is not a personality trait. Some people are born with, and others are not. Focus is a skill, and like any skill, it strengthens with deliberate practice and weakens with neglect. The good news is that you can rebuild it starting today, regardless of how scattered your attention has become. The bad news is that it requires you to say no to a lot of things that feel harmless in the moment, but quietly drain your ability to concentrate on what actually matters. Start by understanding the true cost of distraction. Research on attention consistently shows that every time you switch tasks, your brain does not instantly refocus. It takes real time to fully re-engage with the task you left. So when you check a notification in the middle of important work, you are not just losing the 10 seconds it took to read the message. You are losing the minutes it takes your brain to rebuild the deep concentration it had before the interruption. Multiply that by dozens of interruptions a day, and you begin to see why so many hard-working people feel exhausted while producing very little of actual value. They were busy all day, but they were never focused. The top 1% protect blocks of uninterrupted time the way a serious athlete protects their training schedule. They understand that shallow, scattered effort produces shallow, scattered results, while deep, focused effort compounds into extraordinary work over time. This is why you often hear about highly successful people working in intense, distraction-free blocks, rather than staying loosely available all day long. They are not working more hours than everyone else. They are working with far greater concentration during the hours they choose. One of the most powerful practices you can adopt is designing your environment before you rely on willpower. Willpower is a limited resource, and depending on it to resist every notification, every temptation, and every distraction throughout the day will exhaust you by noon. Instead, remove the temptation before it has a chance to pull at you. Put your phone in a different room while you work on something important. Turn off notifications that are not essential. Close every browser tab that is not related to your current task. You are not weak for needing these barriers. You are wise for recognizing that the environment shapes behavior far more reliably than willpower alone. Consider building your day around a single, non-negotiable block of deep focus time, ideally during the hours when your mental energy is naturally at its highest. For most people, this is earlier in the day, before the accumulated decisions and interruptions of daily life have worn down their mental sharpness. During this block, commit to working on only one task, the task that matters most for your long-term goals, without switching to email, messages, or anything else. Even 90 minutes of true, undistracted focus can produce more meaningful progress than an entire scattered day. Real-world application requires honesty about your current habits. Take an honest inventory of how you actually spend your time over the next 3 days. Do not judge yourself yet, simply observe. Notice how many times you reach for your phone without a real reason. Notice how often you start a task and abandon it halfway through to check something unrelated. This awareness alone will likely shock you, and that shock is useful. You cannot fix a leak you refuse to see, and most people are losing hours of their most productive energy every single day to leaks they have never bothered to examine. Once you see the pattern clearly, begin replacing it one habit at a time. Instead of checking your phone the moment you wake up, give yourself the first 30 minutes of your day free from screens. Use that time to plan your priorities, move your body, or simply sit in quiet thought. This single shift changes the entire tone of your day, because you begin it on your own terms, rather than reacting to whatever demands appeared in your notifications overnight. Focus also requires ruthless clarity about your priorities. A person trying to focus on everything ends up focused on nothing. Each day, identify the 1 or 2 tasks that would make the biggest difference in your life if you completed them, and give those tasks your best energy first. Everything else, the emails, the minor errands, the low-value meetings, can wait until your peak focus has already been spent on what truly matters. This is not about ignoring your responsibilities. It is about sequencing your effort so that your best mental energy goes toward your most important work, not your most urgent noise. There is also an emotional dimension to distraction that deserves honest attention. Many people reach for their phones not out of genuine need, but out of discomfort, boredom, anxiety, or the fear of sitting alone with their own thoughts drives them toward the easy escape of scrolling. If this describes you, know that you are not alone, and know that this pattern can be retrained. The next time you feel the urge to reach for a distraction, pause and ask yourself what feeling you are trying to avoid. Sometimes simply naming that feeling reduces its power over you, and you find you are able to return to your work with a clearer, calmer mind. Protecting your focus is also an act of self-respect. Every time you allow shallow distractions to consume the hours meant for meaningful work, you are quietly telling yourself that your goals do not deserve your best attention. Reverse that message. Treat your focus time as sacred, something you protect, the way you would protect anything else you deeply value. When you start treating your attention as precious instead of disposable, you will notice other people around you begin to respect your time differently as well, because you are modeling that respect first. Build small rituals that signal to your brain it is time to focus. This could be as simple as making a cup of tea before you begin deep work, or writing down your single most important task on a piece of paper before you start. These rituals create a mental transition point, training your brain to shift gears from scattered to focused more quickly over time. Athletes use pre-performance routines for this exact reason, and you can use the same principle to prepare your mind for meaningful work. Do not underestimate the power of rest in building unbreakable focus. A mind that never rests cannot sustain deep concentration for long. Build in genuine breaks, away from screens, where your brain can recover. A short walk without your phone, a few minutes of quiet breathing, or simply staring out a window can restore your mental sharpness far more effectively than another cup of coffee or another scroll through social media. Focus is not about grinding without pause. It is about working with full intensity during your chosen blocks, then genuinely resting so you can return to that intensity again tomorrow. Over time, this practice compounds in ways that are difficult to see day to day, but impossible to ignore over months and years. The person who protects 2 hours of true focus daily will eventually outproduce the person who spends 8 scattered hours reacting to whatever demands their attention. This is not motivational exaggeration. It is simple math applied to the quality of effort rather than just the quantity of hours logged. The top 1% did not get there by being busier than everyone else. They got there by being more focused than everyone else on the things that actually mattered. Starting today, choose one distraction that has been quietly stealing your best hours and remove it from your environment during your focus blocks. It might be your phone. It might be a particular app. It might be the habit of checking messages the moment they arrive. Whatever it is, name it honestly and remove it deliberately. This single decision, repeated daily, will begin rebuilding the muscle of focus that modern life has worn thin. Your attention is the most valuable currency you hold. Spend it on purpose, protect it fiercely, and watch how much more of your life you are able to build with the same 24 hours everyone else is given. It is worth acknowledging directly why this feels so difficult in the modern world, because understanding the difficulty helps you stop blaming yourself unfairly for struggling with it. The tools competing for your attention are not neutral. They are built by teams studying human psychology specifically to make disengagement as difficult as possible. Every autoplay feature, every infinite scroll, every notification badge was designed with a specific purpose, keeping you engaged longer than you originally intended. Recognizing this design does not make you immune to it, but it does mean your struggle with focus is not a personal weakness. It is a completely predictable response to an environment engineered against sustained attention. Given this reality, treat your focus like a garden that requires ongoing tending rather than a switch you flip once and forget. Some weeks will feel easier than others. A stressful period, a lack of sleep, or a major life change can all temporarily weaken your ability to concentrate, and that is a normal fluctuation rather than a sign that your progress has been erased. Return to your practices without harsh self-judgment whenever you notice your focus slipping, the same way a gardener simply returns to pulling weeds rather than concluding the entire garden has failed because a few weeds appeared. Consider also the compounding relationship between focus and confidence. Every time you complete a genuinely focused block of work, you gather evidence that you are capable of sustained concentration, and this evidence gradually builds a kind of self-trust that makes the next focused session slightly easier to begin. Conversely, every scattered, distraction-filled day chips away at that same self-trust, making you doubt your own capacity for deep work. This means your daily choices around focus are not just producing immediate output, they are shaping your long-term identity as either someone who can concentrate deeply or someone who cannot, and that identity becomes a self-fulfilling pattern over time. One final practical note deserves your attention here. Do not mistake the appearance of busyness for genuine focus. Sitting at a desk for 8 hours while frequently checking messages is not focus, even though it may look productive from the outside. True focus is measured by the quality and completion of meaningful work, not by the number of hours spent in proximity to that work. Judge your days by what you actually finished with your full attention, not by how long you sat near your responsibilities while your mind wandered elsewhere. Consider, too, how focus interacts with the goals you set for yourself. A goal without a corresponding block of protected attention remains a wish, something you hope will happen, rather than something you are actively building. Every meaningful goal in your life deserves a specific, recurring block of focused time dedicated to it, not simply a mention on a list of intentions. If a goal genuinely matters to you, it should be able to point to a specific place on your calendar where focused effort toward it actually happens. If it cannot, that gap between stated priority and actual scheduled attention is worth examining honestly. Chapter 3. Train your brain to think like a millionaire. The way you think about money right now was not chosen by you. It was inherited, absorbed from the words your family spoke at the dinner table, the beliefs your community held about wealth, and the fears that were quietly passed down to you long before you were old enough to question them. Most people never examine these inherited beliefs. They simply carry them for an entire lifetime, wondering why financial success always seems to stay just out of reach. Training your brain to think like a millionaire begins with dragging these hidden beliefs into the light and deciding, consciously, which ones actually serve you and which ones need to be replaced. Consider the phrases you may have heard growing up. Money does not grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. We cannot afford that. Each of these statements, repeated often enough during childhood, becomes a quiet operating system running in the background of your adult decisions. You may consciously want to build wealth, but if your subconscious still believes that wanting more money makes you greedy, you will unconsciously sabotage your own progress every time you get close to real financial growth. This is not superstition. It is simply how deeply repeated beliefs shape behavior over time, often without you ever noticing the connection. People who build significant wealth think about money fundamentally differently than people who struggle with it, and the difference has very little to do with intelligence or luck. It has everything to do with the mental framework they use to interpret financial decisions. Where an average mindset sees an expense as money gone forever, a wealth-building mindset asks whether this money is being spent or invested. Where an average mindset sees a financial setback as proof they are bad with money, a wealth-building mindset sees it as feedback, a lesson to apply going forward. The events themselves are often identical. The interpretation is what diverges, and that interpretation shapes every decision that follows. One of the clearest differences lies in how wealth-minded people view risk. Most people are taught to avoid risk entirely, to seek the safest possible path, to prioritize security above growth. This instinct is understandable, especially for anyone who grew up without much financial cushion. But avoiding all risk does not lead to safety over the long run. It often leads to slow, quiet stagnation, where inflation erodes savings and opportunities pass by untouched because they felt too uncertain. Wealth-minded thinking does not mean reckless risk-taking. It means learning to evaluate risk clearly, understanding what you can actually afford to lose, and taking calculated action instead of freezing in fear. Another core difference is how wealth-minded people relate to their own skills and time. Many people trade time for money in a straight line, working an hour to earn a fixed wage, and never questioning whether there might be other ways to generate value. A wealth-building mindset constantly asks how effort can be multiplied. Can this skill be taught to others? Can this solution be packaged and sold to more than one person? Can this process be built once and then repeated, without requiring the same amount of personal time each time? This is not about abandoning hard work. It is about directing that hard work toward things that continue producing value long after the initial effort was made. Let us talk honestly about scarcity thinking, because it quietly runs the financial decisions of far more people than are willing to admit it. Scarcity thinking says, there is only so much money to go around, and if someone else gets ahead, there must be less available for you. This belief creates comparison, resentment, and a defensive posture around money that makes generosity and bold action feel dangerous. Abundance thinking, by contrast, recognizes that value can be created, not just divided. New businesses are started every day. New solutions to old problems are constantly being built. The economic pie is not fixed. It grows when people create genuine value for others, and wealth-minded individuals focus their energy on creation rather than competition over a shrinking slice. Real-world application starts with becoming aware of your own money scripts, the automatic beliefs that surface whenever you think about spending, saving, or investing. For the next week, notice your internal reaction every time money comes up in conversation or decision-making. Do you feel anxious? Do you feel a need to justify wanting more? Do you assume opportunities are not meant for someone like you? Write these reactions down without judgment. This is simply data, the raw material you need before you can begin replacing outdated beliefs with ones that actually serve the life you are trying to build. Once you have identified a limiting belief, challenge it directly with evidence. If you believe wanting more money makes you greedy, look for real examples of people who used financial success to help others, to create jobs, to fund causes they cared about. If you believe you are simply not the kind of person who becomes wealthy, look for people who started in circumstances similar to or harder than yours, and eventually built something meaningful. You are not trying to convince yourself of something false. You are correcting a distorted belief with a more accurate and complete picture of what is actually possible. This process of evidence gathering works best when it becomes an ongoing habit, rather than a single exercise completed once and forgotten. Keep a running list of examples that challenge your old limiting beliefs, adding to it whenever you encounter a new story or piece of information that expands your sense of what is genuinely possible. Over time, this list becomes a powerful counterweight to the old, inherited beliefs that once ran unquestioned in the background of your financial decisions. Practice reframing financial setbacks as data rather than identity. When a financial decision does not work out the way you hoped, resist the urge to conclude that you are simply bad with money. Instead, ask specific questions. What information did I not have before making this decision? What would I do differently next time with what I know now? This reframe keeps you in a learning posture rather than a defeated one. And learning posture is exactly what allows people to keep taking action after setbacks, instead of giving up entirely. Build the habit of studying how wealth is actually created, rather than absorbing vague cultural myths about luck or inheritance. Read about how real businesses were built, how real investments compounded over decades, how real financial mistakes were made and corrected. The more accurate information you consume about how wealth actually works, the less power outdated, fear-based beliefs will hold over your decisions. Knowledge does not replace mindset work, but it gives your new mindset something solid to stand on. Another practical shift involves how you speak about money in daily conversation. Language shapes belief more than most people realize. If you constantly say things like, "I could never afford that," or "I am just not good with money," you are reinforcing a limiting identity every time the words leave your mouth. Replace this language deliberately. Instead of, "I could never afford that," try, "How could I afford that?" This small shift moves your brain from a closed, defeated posture into a searching, solution-oriented one. And the brain that searches for solutions finds far more of them than the brain that has already decided something is impossible. Wealth-minded thinking also requires patience with a process that does not offer instant results. Many people abandon good financial habits because they do not see dramatic change within the first few months, and they mistakenly conclude that the effort is not working. Real wealth building, whether through skill development, saving, or investing, tends to look nearly invisible in the early stages and then compounds dramatically over years. The mindset shift here is trusting the process during the invisible stage, continuing to make wise decisions consistently even when the results have not yet become obvious. This is exactly where most people quit, right before the compounding would have started to show. Surround this mindset work with consistent action, because belief without behavior change accomplishes very little. As you identify and replace limiting beliefs about money, pair each shift with a concrete action. If you have decided that opportunities are meant for you too, take one real step toward an opportunity you previously would have avoided. If you have decided that setbacks are data rather than identity, revisit a past financial mistake and extract one specific lesson you can apply moving forward. The mindset creates the direction. The action creates the actual movement. Over time, thinking like someone who builds wealth becomes less of an exercise and more of a natural way you interpret the world. Opportunities that once felt intimidating will start to feel like calculated possibilities. Setbacks that once felt like proof of failure will start to feel like temporary information. This shift does not happen overnight, and it does not happen by accident. It happens because you deliberately chose to examine the beliefs running in the background of your financial life and replace the ones that were holding you back with ones that could actually carry you forward. The people who reach the top 1% were not born with a different brain than you. They simply trained the same brain you have, using deliberate practice, honest self-examination, and consistent action, until wealth-minded thinking became their default instead of their exception. You have that same capacity available to you right now. The only question is whether you are willing to do the quiet, unglamorous work of examining your beliefs before expecting your bank account to change. It helps to remember that changing deeply held beliefs about money rarely happens through a single flash of insight. It happens gradually, through repeated exposure to a new way of thinking, until the new perspective starts to feel more natural than the old one. This is why simply reading this chapter once will not permanently rewire beliefs that were built over decades. Return to these ideas regularly, revisit your money scripts periodically, and notice how your reactions shift over time as you continue practicing this awareness. Growth here looks less like a single dramatic transformation and more like a slow, steady erosion of old thinking, replaced gradually by new thinking that better serves you. Pay attention also to how you respond emotionally when you witness someone else's financial success. A wealth-minded person tends to feel genuine curiosity or inspiration, wondering what decisions and habits led to that outcome. A scarcity-minded person tends to feel resentment or a subtle sense that the other person's gain somehow diminishes their own possibilities. Notice honestly which reaction arises in you most often, because this single reaction reveals a great deal about which mindset is currently running your financial decisions. And awareness of it is the first step toward deliberately choosing curiosity over resentment going forward. Consider building a small, consistent practice of studying financial success stories, not to compare yourself unfavorably, but to normalize the idea that building wealth is a learnable process rather than a mysterious privilege reserved for a fortunate few. The more real examples you expose yourself to, people who started with very little and built something substantial through patience and decision-making you can actually understand, the more your own subconscious beliefs about what is possible for you personally begin to expand. This is not about chasing someone else's specific path. It is about proving to your own mind, through real evidence, that the path itself is walkable. Finally, hold on to the understanding that thinking like a millionaire is ultimately about clarity, not greed. It is about seeing money accurately, as a tool that can be created, multiplied, and directed toward meaningful goals, rather than as a source of anxiety, guilt, or scarcity. This clarity does not develop overnight, but every honest examination of your beliefs, every reframed setback, every piece of language you shift from closed to searching, moves you steadily closer to a mind capable of building and sustaining real financial freedom. Give yourself credit for the mindset shifts you have already begun making, simply by engaging seriously with this chapter. Awareness itself is not a minor accomplishment. Most people move through their entire financial lives without ever pausing to examine the invisible beliefs steering their decisions, and you have already taken that examination further than most people ever will. Continue building on this foundation deliberately, knowing that the mind you are training here will support every practical strategy and habit covered in the chapters that follow. Chapter 4. Turn small daily habits into massive long-term wealth. Nobody becomes wealthy in a single dramatic moment, no matter how the story gets told afterward. Behind every overnight success is a long, quiet stretch of ordinary days, filled with small decisions that nobody was watching. This is the part of the wealth-building story that rarely gets celebrated, because it is not exciting to talk about. But the truth is simple and unavoidable. Your daily habits, repeated consistently over months and years, are the actual engine behind every significant financial outcome you will ever experience. Consider the mathematics of compounding, not just in your investments, but in your habits themselves. A single good decision made once produces a single good result, but a good decision repeated daily for a year produces something entirely different, because each repetition builds on the last, creating momentum that a one-time effort could never achieve. This is true of saving money, of building a skill, of nurturing a business idea, and of strengthening your body and mind. The habit itself becomes the multiplier, turning small, almost invisible actions into outcomes that eventually look impossible to someone who only sees the finished result. Most people vastly overestimate what they can accomplish in a single dramatic effort, and vastly underestimate what they can accomplish through small, consistent habits, repeated over a long period. This is why New Year resolutions so often fail within weeks. People attempt a complete transformation overnight, relying on willpower and excitement that inevitably fades, rather than building a small, sustainable habit that can survive the boring, unmotivated days that make up most of real life. Wealth is built during those boring days, not during the exciting bursts of initial motivation. Let us look at what this actually looks like in practice. Saving a small percentage of your income consistently, even an amount that feels almost too small to matter, becomes significant over years because of how compounding works. The habit of setting that money aside before you have the chance to spend it removes the need for willpower at the moment of temptation, because the decision was already made in advance. This single habit, automated and repeated without requiring daily motivation, quietly builds a financial foundation that dramatic, occasional effort never could. The same principle applies to skill development, which is often the true engine behind increased earning potential. Spending even 30 minutes a day deliberately improving a valuable skill may feel insignificant in the moment, but 30 minutes daily, repeated across a full year, adds up to well over 100 hours of focused improvement, an amount of practice that most people never come close to investing in themselves. The person who commits to this small daily habit will, within a few years, possess a level of skill that separates them entirely from people who only practiced sporadically, whenever motivation happened to strike. Health habits deserve equal attention here, because your physical and mental energy directly determines the quality of every other decision you make throughout your day. A tired, depleted mind makes worse financial decisions, worse relationship decisions, and worse long-term choices in general. Small daily habits, consistent sleep, regular movement, mindful eating, are not separate from your wealth-building journey. They are the foundation that determines how much energy and clarity you bring to every other habit on this list. Neglecting this foundation while chasing financial success is like trying to build a tall structure on cracked ground. Real-world application requires starting smaller than your ambition wants you to start. This is the part most people resist, because small feels unimpressive compared to the big vision they are chasing. But small, sustainable habits succeed precisely because they are small enough to survive your busiest, most exhausted days. If your habit requires an hour of energy you do not have on a hard day, you will skip it, and skipped habits quickly become abandoned habits. Choose a version of the habit so small it feels almost too easy to skip, and build consistency there before expanding. For example, rather than committing to an hour of financial education daily, a schedule most people will abandon within 2 weeks. Commit to 10 focused minutes. Rather than committing to save a large percentage of income you have never actually saved before, commit to a smaller percentage that feels comfortable enough to sustain without resentment. The goal in the early stages is not intensity. The goal is consistency, because consistency is what allows compounding to actually take effect. You can always increase intensity once the habit has become a stable part of your identity, but you cannot compound a habit that never survives past its first difficult week. Track your habits visibly, because what gets measured tends to get maintained. A simple calendar where you mark each day you complete your chosen habit creates a visual chain that becomes surprisingly motivating over time. Nobody wants to be the person who breaks a chain they have been building for weeks. This small psychological trick, used by countless people who successfully built lasting habits, works because it turns an abstract goal into a concrete, visible pattern you can see growing day by day. Understand that habits are far easier to maintain when they are attached to an existing routine, rather than treated as an entirely separate task requiring its own motivation. If you already brew coffee every morning, attach your financial review to that existing routine, reviewing your spending or your goals while your coffee brews. If you already commute to work, attach an educational podcast or audiobook to that existing time block. This method, often called habit stacking, borrows the stability of an established routine to support a new one, dramatically increasing the odds that the new habit survives past its first few uncertain weeks. Expect resistance, especially in the early weeks, and do not interpret that resistance as evidence that the habit is not working. Nearly every meaningful habit feels uncomfortable and unnatural before it becomes automatic. Neuroscience research on habit formation consistently shows that new behaviors require weeks of repetition before they begin feeling effortless. If you quit during this uncomfortable phase, which is exactly when most people quit, you never reach the point where the habit becomes easy and self-sustaining. Push through the early resistance, knowing it is a temporary and expected part of the process, not a sign of personal failure. Give yourself permission to miss a day without abandoning the entire habit. Perfection is not the goal, and chasing it often destroys habits faster than inconsistency itself, because a single missed day feels like proof of failure to someone with an all-or-nothing mindset. The people who successfully build lasting habits are not the ones who never miss a day. They are the ones who miss a day and simply return to the habit the next day without turning one missed session into a permanently abandoned goal. Resilience in habit building matters far more than flawless execution. As these small habits accumulate, something powerful begins to happen that is difficult to appreciate until you experience it directly. The habits themselves start to shape your identity. You stop being someone who is trying to save money and start being someone who simply saves money, because it has become part of who you are, rather than something you have to force yourself to do. This identity shift is the true engine behind long-term wealth, because identity-driven habits sustain themselves far longer than motivation-driven ones ever could. Motivation fades. Identity persists. Look at your current daily routine honestly and identify one small habit you could begin today that, if repeated consistently for the next year, would meaningfully move you toward the financial future you actually want. It does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be sustainable. Commit to that single habit, track it visibly, attach it to an existing routine, and give yourself grace on the days you fall short. This is how every meaningful fortune has ever actually been built, not through one heroic effort, but through hundreds of small, unglamorous decisions, repeated quietly, until the results became impossible to ignore. It is worth being honest about the emotional experience of building habits during the middle stretch, the long, unglamorous period after the initial excitement has faded, but before the results have become visible enough to feel rewarding. This middle stretch is where the vast majority of people abandon their habits, precisely because it offers the least visible feedback. Understanding this in advance helps you push through it with patience, rather than mistaking the lack of visible progress for proof that the habit is not working. Trust the process during this invisible period, the same way a farmer trusts a planted seed they cannot yet see growing beneath the soil. Consider also how habits interact with each other, because a strong habit in one area often creates positive momentum that spills into other areas of your life. Someone who successfully builds a consistent saving habit often finds it easier to build a consistent exercise habit, not because the two are directly related, but because success in one domain builds a general sense of self-discipline and capability that transfers elsewhere. This is sometimes called a keystone habit effect, and it means that choosing your first habit wisely, focusing on something that genuinely matters to you, can create ripple effects far beyond the specific behavior itself. Do not underestimate the value of celebrating small wins along the way. Many people withhold any sense of accomplishment until they reach a major milestone, treating every step before that milestone as insignificant. This approach drains motivation over the long stretches required for genuine habit formation. Instead, acknowledge genuinely, even briefly, each week of consistency, each small increase in savings, each measurable improvement in a skill you are building. This recognition does not need to be elaborate. It simply needs to be genuine, reinforcing to your own mind that the daily effort is being noticed and valued, not simply expected and ignored. Remember finally that the habits you build today are not just producing financial results over time. They are producing a version of yourself capable of sustained, disciplined effort, a version of yourself that will be useful in every future challenge you encounter, financial or otherwise. The daily habit is never really just about the specific outcome it produces. It is about the person you become through the consistent practice of showing up, day after day, regardless of how small each individual action might seem in isolation. Consider keeping your habit commitments visible in your physical environment, not buried in an app or a note you rarely open. A simple written reminder on your desk, a habit tracker on your wall, or a recurring alert on your calendar keeps the commitment active in your awareness, rather than allowing it to quietly fade into the background of a busy life. Out of sight genuinely does mean out of mind for most people, and protecting a new habit during its fragile early stages often requires nothing more sophisticated than keeping it consistently visible until it no longer needs the reminder to survive. Chapter 5. Develop fierce discipline when motivation completely disappears. Motivation is one of the least reliable forces you will ever depend on, and yet most people build their entire approach to success around waiting for it to show up. They wait to feel inspired before they start working out. They wait to feel excited before they start saving money. They wait for the perfect surge of energy before they begin the difficult project they have been avoiding for months. This approach fails almost every single time, because motivation is an emotion, and emotions are naturally unstable, rising and falling based on sleep, stress, weather, and 100 other factors completely outside your control. Discipline, unlike motivation, does not ask how you feel before it acts. The top 1% did not build their success during the rare moments when they felt inspired. They built it during the long, unremarkable stretches when motivation was completely absent, when the task in front of them felt boring, uncomfortable, or simply unwanted. What separated them from everyone else was not a mysterious surplus of motivation that other people lacked. It was a decision, made in advance, to act according to their commitments, regardless of how they felt in any given moment. This is the true definition of discipline, and it is a skill available to absolutely anyone willing to practice it. Understand clearly that discipline is not about punishing yourself or forcing your way through life with harsh self-criticism. That approach burns people out quickly and often leads to complete abandonment of the goal altogether. Real discipline is closer to a quiet, steady commitment, the kind a person makes to someone they deeply respect. You would not cancel plans repeatedly on someone you truly valued, and you should extend that same respect to the commitments you have made to your own future. Discipline, at its core, is simply keeping promises to yourself even when nobody else is watching and no immediate reward is waiting on the other side. One of the most important shifts you can make is separating the decision to act from the feeling of wanting to act. Most people wait until they feel ready, feel motivated, or feel in the right mood before beginning important work. This waiting game can stretch on indefinitely because the right feeling often never arrives on schedule. Instead, practice acting immediately upon your commitment, regardless of your current emotional state. The feeling of motivation frequently arrives after you begin, not before, meaning that action itself often generates the very motivation people mistakenly wait for before starting. Consider how this plays out in something as simple as exercise. Almost nobody feels excited to work out in the exact moment they are supposed to begin. The excitement, if it comes at all, usually arrives a few minutes into the session, once momentum has already built. The people who exercise consistently are not people who always feel like exercising. They are people who have trained themselves to begin, regardless of the feeling, trusting that the motivation will likely follow rather than lead. This same principle applies directly to financial discipline, career discipline, and any other area where consistent action determines long-term results. Real-world application of discipline requires removing the daily debate about whether or not you feel like doing something. Every time you allow yourself to negotiate with your commitment based on your current mood, you weaken your discipline muscle and make the next negotiation even easier to win. Instead, decide in advance, during a calm and clear-headed moment, exactly what you will do and when you will do it, and then treat that decision as non-negotiable, similar to a scheduled appointment you would not casually cancel. This removes the exhausting daily battle of willpower and replaces it with a simple, pre-made decision you are simply executing. Build systems that make discipline easier to maintain, rather than relying purely on internal willpower, which fluctuates constantly. Automate your savings so the disciplined financial decision happens without requiring daily motivation. Prepare your workout clothes the night before, so the friction of getting started is reduced. Block dedicated time on your calendar for important work, so the decision of when to begin has already been made in advance. Discipline is far easier to sustain when your environment and systems support the behavior you are trying to build, rather than requiring constant internal struggle against a poorly designed routine. Understand that discomfort is not a signal to stop. Many people interpret the uncomfortable feeling that arises during disciplined action as evidence that something is wrong, that they should quit, or wait for an easier day. In reality, discomfort is often simply the natural sensation of growth, the feeling of a capacity being built that did not exist before. Learning to sit with this discomfort without immediately retreating from it is one of the single most valuable skills you can develop, because nearly every meaningful achievement requires passing through a period of genuine discomfort before it becomes easier. Reframe discipline as an act of self-respect rather than self-punishment. Every time you follow through on a commitment, despite not feeling like it, you send yourself a powerful message that your word to yourself actually means something. Over time, this builds a form of self-trust that becomes one of the most valuable assets you can possess, because a person who trusts their own follow-through can commit to ambitious goals with genuine confidence, knowing they have a proven track record of showing up for themselves, regardless of fleeting emotions. Practice discipline in small, low-stakes areas of your life first, because the skill transfers across contexts. Making your bed every morning, showing up on time to commitments, finishing tasks you start rather than abandoning them halfway. These small disciplines build the same underlying muscle you will need for larger financial and career commitments. Do not dismiss small disciplines as unimportant. They are training grounds where the habit of following through, regardless of feeling, gets rehearsed and strengthened before you need it for something significant. When motivation completely disappears, and it will, remind yourself honestly that this is the exact moment discipline was built for. Anyone can take action when they feel excited and energized. The real separation between those who achieve lasting success and those who do not happens precisely during the stretches when enthusiasm has faded and only commitment remains. Recognize these low motivation periods not as signs of failure, but as the specific terrain where your discipline gets tested and strengthened, the same way physical resistance builds physical strength. Give yourself a simple, repeatable phrase to use during moments of low motivation, something that redirects your focus away from how you feel and back toward what you decided in advance. A phrase as simple as "this is what I committed to" can be surprisingly effective at cutting through the internal negotiation that tries to talk you out of following through. The goal is not to eliminate the negotiation entirely, since it will likely always arise to some degree, but to have a reliable, practiced response ready, so the negotiation does not win by default. Track your discipline the same way you might track a habit, noting the moments you followed through, despite not feeling like it. Over weeks and months, this record becomes powerful evidence, proof to yourself that you are someone capable of consistent action, regardless of emotional weather. This evidence matters deeply during future moments of doubt, because you will be able to look back at a real history of following through, rather than relying on hope alone that you might be capable of it. The wealth, the health, and the success you are working toward will not be built during the rare bursts of high motivation. They will be built during the long, quiet stretches of ordinary discipline, the days nobody sees and nobody applauds. Choose today to stop waiting for motivation before you act, and instead, build the fierce, steady discipline that shows up regardless of how you feel. This single shift, practiced consistently, will carry you further than motivation ever could, because discipline, unlike motivation, never abandons you when you need it most. Understand that discipline tends to feel heaviest right at the beginning of a new commitment, when the habit has not yet become familiar, and every action still requires conscious effort. This initial heaviness is temporary, even though it rarely feels that way while you are inside it. Neuroscience consistently shows that repeated behavior gradually shifts from requiring deliberate effort to becoming closer to automatic, meaning the discipline required to maintain a commitment genuinely decreases over time as the behavior becomes more deeply ingrained. Knowing this in advance can help you tolerate the difficult early stretch without concluding that the difficulty will last forever. Pay attention to the stories you tell yourself about your own capacity for discipline, because these stories shape your future behavior more than most people realize. If you have labeled yourself as someone who lacks discipline based on past experience, That label will quietly influence your future attempts, making it easier to give up, because giving up confirms what you already believed about yourself. Challenge this label directly by collecting small, deliberate pieces of evidence to the contrary, choosing manageable commitments you can genuinely follow through on, and allowing that follow-through to slowly rewrite the story you carry about your own reliability. Recognize also that discipline does not require dramatic intensity to be effective. Many people abandon disciplined habits because they set an unsustainably high bar at the outset, then burn out within weeks, and interpret the burnout as a personal failure rather than a poorly calibrated goal. Sustainable discipline often looks more modest than people expect. A manageable daily commitment maintained consistently over years, rather than an intense commitment maintained only for a few unsustainable weeks. Calibrate your commitments honestly, choosing a level of intensity you can genuinely sustain during your busiest, most tired weeks, not just during your most motivated ones. Finally, remember that discipline is ultimately an act of long-term self-love, even though it often feels uncomfortable in any single moment. Choosing the harder, more disciplined path today is a direct investment in the person you are becoming tomorrow. Someone with greater capability, greater self-trust, and greater freedom, because of the foundation being built through consistent, unglamorous effort. Every disciplined choice, no matter how small it feels in isolation, is a vote for the future version of yourself that you are actively working to become. Keep in mind that discipline and rigidity are not the same thing. A genuinely disciplined life still leaves room for adjustment, for rest when it is truly needed, and for reassessing a commitment that no longer serves your actual goals. The distinction lies in the reason behind the change. Adjusting a commitment based on honest reassessment is wisdom. Abandoning a commitment simply because it became uncomfortable in the moment is the exact pattern this chapter has been asking you to outgrow. Learning to tell these two situations apart honestly is itself part of the discipline you are building. Chapter 6. Overcome fear and take bold, calculated risks daily. Fear is not something the top 1% eliminated from their lives. Every person who has ever built something meaningful has felt genuine fear before taking a significant step forward. The difference between those who achieve extraordinary results and those who remain stuck is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite its presence. Understanding that fear and danger are not the same thing, and that most of what fear warns you about is simply discomfort, not actual harm. Consider how fear actually operates inside your mind. It developed originally to protect early humans from genuine physical threats, predators, starvation, immediate danger to survival. That same ancient alarm system now fires in response to far less dangerous situations. A difficult conversation, a financial investment, a career change, a new business idea. Your body reacts to these modern risks with the same physical response it would use for a genuine survival threat, even though sending an important email or starting a new venture will not actually end your life. Recognizing this mismatch is the first step toward no longer being controlled by a warning system that was calibrated for a completely different kind of danger. Understand clearly the difference between fear and actual risk, because confusing the two keeps people frozen far more often than genuine danger ever would. Fear is a feeling, immediate and often disproportionate to the actual situation. Risk is a calculation, something that can be measured, researched, and understood before you act. The top 1% did not simply ignore risk and charge forward recklessly. They developed the skill of separating the emotional noise of fear from the actual, calculable risk of a decision, and they made their choices based on the calculation rather than the noise. This distinction matters enormously in practical decision-making. Before dismissing an opportunity because it feels frightening, ask yourself specific, grounded questions. What is the actual worst realistic outcome if this does not work? Could I recover from that outcome? What is the actual likelihood of that worst outcome occurring, based on real information rather than imagined catastrophe? Very often, when you walk through these questions honestly, you discover that the worst realistic outcome is survivable, and the fear you were feeling was disproportionate to the genuine risk involved. This exercise does not eliminate fear, but it gives you accurate information to act alongside it, instead of being ruled by it blindly. Bold action does not mean reckless action. There is an important difference between someone who takes calculated risks after honest evaluation and someone who gambles impulsively without any real assessment of consequences. Calculated risk-taking involves gathering relevant information, understanding your actual downside, and proceeding deliberately, even though certainty is never fully available. Waiting for complete certainty before taking any risk guarantees that you will never take meaningful action at all, because certainty simply does not exist in any pursuit worth pursuing. Every significant opportunity requires moving forward with incomplete information, trusting your preparation and your ability to adapt along the way. Real-world application of this principle starts with small, deliberate exposure to discomfort, gradually building your tolerance for the physical sensation of fear, so it no longer controls your decisions by default. Begin having conversations you have been avoiding, out of discomfort. Begin pitching ideas you have kept quiet, out of fear of rejection. Begin making small financial decisions that stretch slightly beyond your comfort zone after honest evaluation. Each time you act despite fear and survive the experience, you build evidence that fear's warnings are frequently exaggerated, and this evidence gradually reduces fear's grip on your future decisions. Reframe rejection and failure as simply the cost of doing business in any meaningful pursuit, rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Every successful investor has made investments that lost money. Every successful entrepreneur has launched ideas that failed. Every person who eventually achieved something significant has been told no, has been turned down, has watched an attempt collapse. What separated them from people who gave up permanently was their refusal to treat a single failed attempt as final proof that the entire pursuit was impossible. They treated failure as tuition, an expected cost of learning what actually works. Develop the habit of asking what you would attempt if you knew you could not fail, and then examine honestly what is actually stopping you from attempting a scaled-down version of that same idea right now. Often the barrier is not truly external circumstances, but an internal fear of embarrassment, of judgment, of the discomfort that comes with trying something publicly and not succeeding immediately. Naming this fear honestly, rather than disguising it as practical hesitation, allows you to address the real obstacle instead of endlessly rationalizing around it. Practice making bold decisions in small, low-stakes situations first, deliberately building your capacity for calculated risk before facing high-stakes decisions. Order something unfamiliar at a restaurant instead of your usual choice. Speak up with an honest opinion in a meeting instead of staying silent. Reach out to someone you admire instead of assuming they would not respond. These small acts of boldness, repeated consistently, train your nervous system to tolerate the discomfort of uncertainty, making larger, more consequential risks feel more manageable when the time comes to take them. Surround your bold decisions with genuine preparation, because preparation is what transforms recklessness into calculated courage. Research the market before making a significant investment. Build a real plan before launching a new venture. Practice a difficult conversation before having it. This preparation does not eliminate fear entirely, but it replaces vague, imagined catastrophe with concrete understanding, allowing you to act with grounded confidence rather than blind hope. Bold action supported by genuine preparation is fundamentally different from impulsive action taken without any real thought. Understand that inaction carries its own risk, one that is frequently invisible, because it does not produce an immediate, obvious consequence the way a failed attempt does. Choosing not to invest carries the risk of missed growth. Choosing not to pursue an opportunity carries the risk of remaining stuck exactly where you already are. This hidden risk of inaction rarely gets weighed as seriously as the visible risk of action, yet over the course of a lifetime, unexamined inaction often produces far greater regret than any specific failed attempt ever does. Weigh both risks honestly, the risk of acting and the risk of remaining still, before defaulting to the safety of doing nothing. Build a support system of people who encourage calculated boldness, rather than reinforcing your fear. The people you surround yourself with heavily influence how much risk feels acceptable to you. If everyone around you consistently discourages ambitious moves out of their own fear, their caution will quietly shape your decisions, even when it does not serve your actual goals. Seek out people who have taken calculated risks themselves, who can offer grounded perspective rather than fear-based warnings, dressed up as practical advice. Remind yourself regularly that comfort and growth cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Every version of your life that you are hoping to build exists just beyond your current comfort zone, waiting for you to act despite the discomfort of uncertainty. The top 1% did not wait for fear to disappear before moving forward. They developed a working relationship with fear, acknowledging its presence, evaluating the actual risk honestly, preparing thoroughly, and then acting anyway. This is not the absence of fear. This is mastery over it, and that same mastery is fully available to you, starting with the very next opportunity that makes your stomach tighten with uncertainty. It is worth acknowledging that the physical sensation of fear, the racing heart, the tight chest, the urge to avoid, will likely never fully disappear, no matter how much calculated risk you take throughout your life. Even highly experienced people who have taken bold action repeatedly still feel this physical response before significant decisions. The goal was never to eliminate the sensation entirely. The goal is to stop treating that sensation as an automatic stop sign, learning instead to act alongside it, once you have honestly evaluated the actual risk involved. This distinction between managing fear and being controlled by it is one of the most liberating realizations you can carry forward from this chapter. Consider keeping a simple record of the bold decisions you make over time, along with their actual outcomes, both the ones that worked and the ones that did not. Reviewing this record periodically often reveals a pattern that surprises people, that the worst-case scenarios they feared so intensely rarely materialized, and even when they did occur, they were almost always survivable and often followed by valuable lessons that improved future decisions. This record becomes a powerful antidote to fear over time, replacing imagined catastrophe with a grounded, evidence-based understanding of what bold action in your own life actually tends to produce. Understand also that calculated risk-taking is a skill that improves specifically through repetition within a particular domain. Someone who has taken numerous calculated financial risks develops sharper judgment about financial risk specifically, while someone who has taken numerous calculated risks in relationships develops sharper judgment in that particular domain. This means the discomfort of a first attempt in any new area of risk is expected and should not be mistaken for a sign that you are simply not suited to that kind of boldness. Give yourself permission to be a genuine beginner at calculated risk-taking in new areas of your life, trusting that the judgment will sharpen with honest, repeated practice. Finally, hold on to the understanding that regret over inaction tends to compound far more painfully over time than regret over a failed attempt. People rarely look back with lasting pain over a calculated risk that did not work out, because they can usually see the lesson and the growth embedded within that experience. But people frequently carry lasting regret over opportunities they never attempted at all, wondering indefinitely what might have happened had they simply taken the chance. Let this understanding tip the scale the next time fear tries to convince you that staying still is the safer choice. Notice, too, how much easier bold action becomes once you have a clear enough reason behind it. A risk taken simply for the sake of proving something to yourself often collapses under pressure the moment the discomfort intensifies. A risk taken in service of a genuinely meaningful goal, one connected to your values, your family, or the future you are actively trying to build, tends to carry you through the discomfort far more reliably. Before your next bold decision, take a moment to reconnect with the deeper reason behind it. That reason will matter far more in the difficult middle of the attempt than it does in the exciting moment you first decide to begin. Chapter 7. Transform every failure into fuel for future success. Every person you have ever admired for their success has a private history of failure that rarely gets told alongside their achievements. The businesses that collapsed before the one that worked. The investments that lost money before the strategy that finally paid off. The relationships and partnerships that fell apart before they learned what genuine collaboration required. Success stories are almost always edited down to their highlights, quietly erasing the long, difficult stretch of failure that made the eventual success possible. If you only study the highlight reel, you will believe that successful people simply got it right the first time, and you will judge your own inevitable failures far too harshly by comparison. Understand clearly that failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is a necessary and unavoidable part of the process that eventually produces success. Nobody has ever built something significant without encountering failure along the way, because failure is simply what happens when you attempt something beyond what you have already proven you can do. If you are not experiencing occasional failure, it likely means you are not attempting anything beyond your current comfort zone. And staying entirely within your comfort zone virtually guarantees that your results will remain exactly where they already are. The top 1% did not develop a special immunity to failure. They developed a different relationship with it, one where failure gets processed as valuable information, rather than as a verdict on their worth or capability. This distinction matters enormously, because how you interpret a failure directly determines whether you continue moving forward or whether you quit entirely. Two people can experience the exact same failed attempt and walk away with completely different conclusions. One deciding they are simply not capable, the other deciding they now understand one more thing that does not work, bringing them one step closer to what does. Consider the specific language you use internally when something fails. If your automatic thought is, "I am a failure," you have attached the outcome directly to your identity, making it feel deeply personal and difficult to recover from. If your automatic thought is instead, "That attempt failed," you have kept the outcome separate from your identity, treating it as a specific, isolated event rather than a permanent characteristic. This small linguistic shift carries enormous psychological weight, because identity-based failure feels nearly impossible to overcome, while event-based failure simply requires a new attempt with adjusted information. Real-world application of this principle begins immediately after a failure occurs, during the emotional aftermath, when the temptation to quit or to harshly judge yourself is strongest. Rather than rushing past the discomfort or wallowing in it indefinitely, build a habit of conducting an honest, specific review. What exactly happened? What factors were within your control? And what factors were not? What specific adjustment would you make if you attempted this again with the information you now have? This review transforms a vague, emotionally overwhelming failure into a concrete, actionable lesson, something you can actually use, rather than something you simply have to endure. Write these lessons down, because memory alone tends to preserve the emotional sting of failure far more vividly than the specific, useful lesson buried within it. A written record allows you to return to past failures later with a clearer head, extracting practical wisdom rather than simply reliving the discomfort. Over time, this record becomes a genuinely valuable resource, a personal case study library built from your own direct experience, often more useful than any external advice, because it is calibrated specifically to your own circumstances and decisions. Resist the common trap of hiding your failures out of shame, because concealment tends to prolong the emotional weight of a failure rather than resolving it. Speaking honestly about a setback, whether with a trusted mentor, a close friend, or simply in your own private reflection, often reveals that the failure feels far less catastrophic once it is examined openly rather than carried silently. Many people discover that the story they were telling themselves privately about their failure was significantly harsher and more exaggerated than the reality anyone else would have assigned to the same situation. Understand that recovery time after failure matters enormously, and this is an area where deliberate practice makes a real difference. Some people spend months paralyzed by a single setback, unable to attempt anything new because the fear of repeating the failure feels overwhelming. Others process the emotional impact relatively quickly and return to meaningful action within days. This recovery speed is not simply a fixed personality trait. It is a skill that improves with practice, the same way physical resilience improves with repeated, deliberate exposure to challenge. Each failure you recover from more quickly than the last builds your capacity to recover even faster the next time. Build a personal practice of celebrating the attempt itself, separate from the outcome. This might feel counterintuitive at first, especially if you were raised in an environment where only successful outcomes received recognition. But attempting something difficult, uncertain, and outside your comfort zone is itself a meaningful accomplishment, regardless of how the specific outcome unfolds. Recognizing and honoring the courage required simply to attempt something difficult helps decouple your sense of self-worth from outcomes you cannot fully control. And this decoupling makes you far more willing to attempt bold things repeatedly over the course of your life. Look honestly at the pattern across multiple failures rather than analyzing each one in isolation. Sometimes a single failure reveals very little on its own, but a pattern across several failures reveals something genuinely important about a skill gap, a blind spot, or an assumption that needs to be re-examined. This pattern-level analysis requires patience and a willingness to look at your own track record honestly, without either dismissing every failure as bad luck or concluding from every failure that you are fundamentally incapable. The truth usually sits somewhere between those two extremes, in specific, correctable patterns worth genuine attention. Use past failures as concrete evidence of your resilience, rather than evidence of your limitation. Every failure you have already survived, no matter how painful it felt at the time, is proof that you are capable of enduring difficulty and continuing forward afterward. Build a mental inventory of these past recoveries, and return to that inventory during moments when a new failure feels particularly discouraging. You have already proven, multiple times throughout your life, that failure does not end your story. It simply becomes one chapter within a much longer narrative that you are still actively writing. Remember that the people who eventually reach extraordinary levels of success are rarely the most naturally talented individuals in their field. They are far more often the individuals who were willing to fail more times than everyone else was willing to attempt in the first place. Every failed attempt that others avoided out of fear became for them another data point, another lesson, another step closer to the eventual breakthrough. This willingness to fail repeatedly, without allowing failure to become a permanent identity, is one of the single most reliable predictors of long-term success across virtually every field. Starting today, choose to view your next failure, whenever it arrives, as fuel rather than as a verdict. Conduct an honest review. Extract the specific lesson, write it down, and return to action as quickly as you genuinely can. This practice, repeated consistently over the course of your life, transforms failure from something you desperately try to avoid into something you actively use as raw material for growth. The top 1% are not people who failed less than everyone else. They are people who failed forward, consistently, until failure itself became one of their most valuable teachers. It helps to recognize that the fear of failure often causes far more damage than actual failure itself, because the fear keeps people from attempting things in the first place, while actual failure at least produces genuine experience and information. Sit with this distinction honestly. The version of yourself that never attempts anything difficult out of fear of failing will end up in a worse position over the long run than the version of yourself that attempts many things and fails at some of them, because the second version accumulates real skill, real resilience, and real knowledge along the way, while the first version accumulates only the quiet regret of paths never explored. Consider also how the people around you respond to your failures, because their reactions can either reinforce a healthy relationship with failure or damage it further. If the people closest to you tend to react to your setbacks with harsh judgment, or use them as evidence to discourage future attempts, protect yourself by being selective about who you share your setbacks with, particularly during the vulnerable early aftermath, before you have had time to process the experience yourself. Seek out people who understand that failure is part of any meaningful pursuit, people who can offer genuine support and perspective rather than judgment, dressed up as concern. Understand that some failures will hurt more than others, and it is not necessary or realistic to process every setback with perfect emotional composure. Significant failures deserve genuine acknowledgement of the disappointment or grief involved, rather than a forced, artificial positivity that skips past real emotional processing. Allow yourself the honest emotional response a genuine setback deserves, and then, once that initial processing has occurred, begin the practical work of extracting the lesson and moving forward. Both steps matter, the honest feeling and the practical learning, and skipping either one tends to create problems later. Finally, remember that your relationship with failure is not fixed. It can be actively reshaped through deliberate practice, the same way every other skill in this book can be developed with consistent attention. Each time you choose to review a setback honestly rather than avoiding it, each time you extract a specific lesson rather than simply feeling bad, and each time you return to action rather than permanently retreating, you are actively rebuilding your relationship with failure into something far more useful and far less paralyzing than the relationship most people carry by default. Think back over your own life to a failure you experienced years ago that once felt devastating, but now, with the distance of time, looks almost insignificant, perhaps even faintly humorous, or clearly instructive in hindsight. This shift in perspective happened naturally with the passage of time. The practice this chapter is asking you to build is simply accelerating that same natural shift, arriving at the useful, lesson-focused perspective sooner, weeks after a setback rather than years, so that the wisdom becomes available to you, while it can still meaningfully guide your very next attempt. Chapter 8. Protect your time like your most valuable asset. Money lost can be earned again. Opportunities missed can sometimes return in a different form, but time spent is gone permanently, with absolutely no possibility of recovery, no matter how much money or effort you are willing to throw at getting it back. This simple, unavoidable truth is something the top 1% understand at a deep level, and it shapes nearly every decision they make about how they spend their days. Most people intellectually agree that time is valuable, yet very few actually treat it with the seriousness that its irreplaceable nature deserves. Consider how casually most people give away their time throughout an ordinary day. They agree to meetings that could have been a short message. They allow low-value conversations to stretch far longer than necessary out of social obligation. They spend hours consuming content that offers no genuine value, simply because it was available and required no active decision to begin. None of these choices feel significant in isolation, but added together across weeks, months, and years, they represent a staggering amount of a resource that can never be replenished once it is gone. The top 1% guard their time with the same seriousness most people reserve for guarding their money, and often with even greater intensity, because they understand something crucial. Time is the raw material from which every other form of value gets created. Skills require time to develop. Relationships require time to build. Businesses require time to grow. Every meaningful outcome you are hoping to achieve requires an investment of time, which means every hour spent carelessly on something that does not matter is an hour that could have gone towards something that genuinely does. Begin by conducting an honest audit of exactly how you currently spend your time, because most people significantly misjudge where their hours actually go until they track it directly. For several days, record your activities honestly, including the small pockets of time spent scrolling, waiting, or engaging in low-value tasks you may not have consciously noticed before. This audit often reveals a surprising and sometimes uncomfortable truth, that a significant portion of your waking hours are being spent on activities that align with none of your actual goals or values. Once you can see clearly where your time is actually going, begin applying a simple but powerful filter to every request for your time. Ask yourself directly whether this activity moves you closer to something you genuinely care about, or whether it is simply consuming hours out of habit, obligation, or the fear of disappointing someone else. This filter does not mean you should eliminate rest, relationships, or enjoyment from your life, because these things matter deeply and deserve real-time investment. It means becoming intentional, rather than passive, about where your hours actually go, choosing deliberately, rather than defaulting automatically. Learn to say no clearly and without excessive apology, because every yes you give to something unimportant is simultaneously a no to something that might have mattered far more. Many people struggle with this because they fear disappointing others or missing some hidden opportunity. But constantly saying yes out of fear or obligation guarantees that your time gets consumed by other people's priorities rather than directed toward your own. Practice a simple, respectful decline. Something like this: does not work for me right now, delivered without a lengthy justification that invites negotiation. Real-world application requires structuring your calendar around your actual priorities, rather than simply reacting to whatever requests happen to arrive. Block dedicated time for the work that genuinely matters before your day fills up with other people's requests and unexpected demands. Treat these blocks with the same seriousness you would treat an important meeting with someone you deeply respect, because in a real sense, this is exactly what it is: a meeting between you and the future you are trying to build. Identify the activities in your life that consume significant time while delivering minimal genuine value, and examine honestly whether they can be reduced, delegated, or eliminated entirely. Some tasks genuinely require your personal attention. Many others do not, yet people continue doing them personally out of habit, a desire for control, or simply never having questioned whether the task truly needed to be theirs. Delegation is not a luxury reserved only for people who have already achieved significant success. It is a skill that, practiced early and deliberately, actually accelerates the achievement of that success by freeing your time for higher value work. Pay close attention to the people you spend your time with, because relationships consume time just as significantly as tasks do, and not all relationships offer an equal return on that investment. This does not mean treating relationships as transactions or abandoning people during difficult times. It means noticing honestly which relationships consistently drain your energy and time without offering genuine connection or mutual growth, and consciously deciding how much of your limited time those relationships genuinely deserve going forward. Understand that busyness is not the same thing as productivity, and many people confuse the two in ways that quietly sabotage their long-term goals. A person can be extremely busy throughout an entire day while accomplishing almost nothing that actually matters, simply because their time was consumed by low-value activity that felt urgent in the moment. Protecting your time means prioritizing importance over urgency whenever possible, recognizing that the most valuable tasks are frequently not the ones screaming loudest for your immediate attention. Build regular time for reflection and planning into your schedule, even though this practice often feels like it is taking time away from actual productive work. In reality, a small amount of deliberate planning time dramatically increases the effectiveness of every other hour in your day, because you are directing your effort with intention rather than simply reacting to whatever appears in front of you. Even 15 minutes at the start of each week, spent identifying your genuine priorities, can meaningfully improve how the following days actually unfold. Recognize that protecting your time will occasionally disappoint people who are accustomed to receiving unlimited access to your attention. This discomfort is a normal and expected part of the transition toward becoming genuinely intentional with your hours. The people who truly respect you and your goals will adjust to your boundaries, and the temporary discomfort of that adjustment is a small price for reclaiming a resource that determines the entire trajectory of your life. Remember that every single person, regardless of their wealth, status, or achievements, receives exactly the same 24 hours in a day. The difference between those who build extraordinary lives and those who remain stuck is rarely about having more time available. It is about how deliberately that identical amount of time gets directed. Starting today, examine your calendar honestly. Identify where your hours are currently leaking away without genuine purpose, and begin redirecting that time toward the goals, relationships, and growth that actually matter to you. Your time is the one asset you can never earn back once it is spent. Treat it accordingly, starting now. It is worth reflecting on how easily time gets sacrificed to activities that feel productive without actually being meaningful. Answering every email the instant it arrives, attending every meeting without questioning its necessity, responding immediately to every message regardless of urgency. These habits create a persistent feeling of busyness that can mask an underlying lack of genuine progress. Distinguish carefully between motion and progress in your own daily life. Motion feels productive because you are constantly doing something. Progress requires that the something you are doing actually moves you closer to a goal that genuinely matters to you. Consider building a simple weekly review, specifically focused on time, separate from any financial or habit tracking you might already be doing. At the end of each week, look honestly at how your hours were actually spent, compared to how you intended to spend them. Notice any recurring time leaks, activities that consistently consume more time than they deserve, given their actual importance. This regular review keeps your time awareness active, rather than allowing it to fade back into unconscious, reactive scheduling, once the initial motivation from reading this chapter has worn off. Understand that protecting your time will sometimes require difficult, uncomfortable conversations, particularly with people who have grown accustomed to unlimited access to your schedule. These conversations do not need to be harsh or confrontational. A simple, respectful boundary, communicated clearly and consistently, is usually sufficient to reshape expectations over time. The discomfort of these conversations is temporary, while the compounding cost of failing to have them stretches out across years of misdirected time that can never be recovered. Finally, hold on to the understanding that time protection is not about eliminating rest, leisure, or genuine enjoyment from your life. A life spent entirely in disciplined productivity, without any space for rest and joy, is not actually a well-protected life. It is simply a different form of imbalance. Protecting your time means being deliberate about all of it, including the hours you consciously choose to dedicate to rest and relationships, ensuring that even your leisure time is a genuine choice, rather than simply what remained after everything else consumed your attention by default. Take a moment right now to picture your ideal week, not an unrealistic fantasy, but a genuinely achievable arrangement of hours, dedicated to the things that matter most to you: work, rest, relationships, and growth, in proportions that reflect your actual values. Compare that picture honestly to how your current week actually unfolds. The gap between the two is not a source of guilt. It is simply useful information, a map showing you exactly where your next adjustments need to happen if you want your calendar to genuinely reflect the life you say you want to build. Chapter 9. Surround yourself with people who elevate your standards. You are shaped, far more than most people realize, by the standards of the people you spend the most time around. Their habits become templates you unconsciously borrow. Their beliefs about what is possible quietly influence your own sense of what you are allowed to attempt. Their tolerance for mediocrity, or their commitment to excellence, gradually rubs off on you, whether you consciously choose it or simply absorb it through repeated exposure. This is not a vague, motivational idea. It is a well-documented pattern of human behavior, and it means the people you surround yourself with are quietly determining a significant portion of your future results. Consider honestly the standards held by the people who occupy the most time in your life right now. Do the people around you regularly discuss growth, ideas, and possibility? Or do conversations tend to circle around complaints, gossip, and reasons why things cannot be done? Do the people closest to you take consistent action toward their goals? Or do they primarily talk about goals without following through? These patterns matter enormously, because you will naturally begin calibrating your own effort and expectations to match the environment you spend the most time inside of, often without realizing the calibration is even happening. The top 1% are notably deliberate about who they allow into their inner circle, not out of arrogance or a desire to exclude others, but out of a clear understanding that their environment directly shapes their standards. They actively seek out relationships with people who challenge them to grow, who hold themselves to a high level of accountability, and who genuinely celebrate ambitious goals rather than quietly discouraging them out of their own fear or insecurity. This deliberate curation of relationships is not a luxury available only to already successful people. It is a practice that accelerates success, precisely because it gets adopted early. Understand clearly that this principle is not about abandoning people simply because they have not yet achieved a certain level of success. It is about paying close attention to how people respond to your own growth and ambition. Some people, regardless of their own current circumstances, genuinely celebrate your progress and encourage your ambitious goals. Others, often without even realizing it themselves, respond to your growth with subtle discouragement, dismissiveness, or attempts to pull you back toward familiar, shared limitations. Learning to notice this difference honestly is essential to protecting your own standards over time. Real-world application begins with an honest inventory of your closest relationships and the standards those relationships tend to reinforce. This is not an exercise in judgment or superiority. It is simply honest observation. After spending time with certain people, do you generally leave feeling more inspired, more capable, more motivated to pursue your goals? After spending time with others, do you consistently leave feeling drained, discouraged, or subtly convinced that your ambitions are unrealistic? Pay attention to these patterns over several weeks, because they reveal far more about the true influence of a relationship than any single conversation could. Deliberately seek out environments and communities where the standards are genuinely higher than your current default, even if this initially feels intimidating or uncomfortable. Join groups, attend events, or engage with communities built around the specific growth you are trying to achieve, whether that involves financial literacy, entrepreneurship, health, or personal development. Being surrounded by people already operating at a level you are working toward provides both practical knowledge and, perhaps more importantly, a recalibrated sense of what is actually normal and achievable, which quietly raises your own internal standards over time. Understand that raising your standards through relationships does not require immediately severing ties with everyone in your current life who has not yet reached your desired level of growth. Many meaningful relationships can coexist alongside your pursuit of higher standards, particularly relationships built on genuine love, history, and mutual respect. The key distinction is awareness, understanding which relationships genuinely support your growth, which relationships are simply neutral, and which relationships actively work against the standards you are trying to build, so that you can make conscious, informed decisions about how much time and energy each relationship genuinely deserves. Seek out mentors, even informal ones, who are further along the specific path you are pursuing. A mentor does not need to be someone who agrees to a formal arrangement. It can simply be someone whose work, decisions, and standards you study closely, whether through direct conversation, their public work, or their example. Ask thoughtful questions when access allows. Observe carefully how they approach challenges, setbacks, and decisions. This kind of learning, absorbed through proximity and observation, often teaches lessons that no book or course could fully replicate, because you are witnessing genuine standards in action, rather than simply reading about them in theory. Be equally mindful of the media, content, and information you consume regularly, because this functions as a form of relationship, even when it does not involve direct personal interaction. Constant exposure to content that reinforces scarcity, complaint, or cynicism will shape your standards just as powerfully as spending time with people who hold those same attitudes. Curate your media consumption with the same deliberate care you apply to your personal relationships, seeking out voices that model the standards, discipline, and possibility you are actively trying to build within yourself. Recognize that becoming a person who holds higher standards will occasionally create friction within existing relationships, particularly with people who have grown accustomed to a version of you that match their own current level of expectation. This friction, while uncomfortable, is not necessarily a sign that something has gone wrong. It is often simply evidence that genuine growth is occurring, and that some relationships will need to adjust, evolve, or naturally create more distance as your standards continue to rise. This is a normal and expected part of meaningful personal growth, not a reason to abandon the growth itself. Give generously to the relationships that genuinely elevate you, rather than treating these relationships purely as something to extract value from. The healthiest high-standard relationships are mutual, built on genuine care and reciprocal support, rather than one-sided benefit. Show up consistently for the people who show up for your growth. Celebrate their progress as genuinely as you hope they celebrate yours. This mutual investment strengthens the relationship over time, creating a genuine partnership in growth rather than a purely transactional connection. Understand finally that you also serve as an environment for other people, and the standards you model influence everyone around you, just as significantly as their standards influence you. Take this responsibility seriously. Show up as someone whose discipline, growth, and ambition genuinely inspire the people in your own circle, becoming the kind of high-standard influence in someone else's life that you are actively seeking in your own. This reciprocal elevation, where growth-minded people continuously raise each other's standards, is precisely how the strongest communities and the most successful individuals sustain their growth over the long term. Starting today, look honestly at the 5 people you spend the most time with, and ask yourself directly whether their standards, habits, and ambitions genuinely match the future you are working to build. Where gaps exist, take deliberate action, seeking out new relationships and environments that reflect the standards you are striving toward, while maintaining genuine care for the relationships that matter most, regardless of where they currently stand. The people around you are quietly shaping your future every single day. Choose that influence with the same intention you would apply to any other decision that determines the trajectory of your life. It is worth acknowledging that raising your standards through your relationships often feels lonely in the early stages, particularly if your current circle has not yet embraced the same level of growth you are pursuing. This loneliness is a normal, temporary phase, rather than a permanent condition. As you continue seeking out higher standard environments and relationships, new connections will gradually form that better match where you are headed, and this transitional discomfort tends to ease considerably once those new relationships have had time to develop genuine depth. Consider also the difference between relationships built on shared history and relationships built on shared direction. Both types of relationships can hold real value, but they serve different purposes in your life. Relationships built on shared history often provide comfort, familiarity, and a sense of being known over a long period of time. Relationships built on shared direction often provide accountability, inspiration, and practical insight into the specific growth you are currently pursuing. A well-rounded life generally benefits from both types of relationships, and recognizing which type a given relationship represents helps you set realistic expectations for what that relationship can genuinely offer you. Pay attention to how you show up within your own relationships, not only to what you receive from them. Elevating your standards is not solely about seeking out people who are already further along than you. It is equally about becoming someone whose consistency, honesty, and follow-through make you a valuable presence in other people's lives as well. Ask yourself honestly whether you are the kind of friend, colleague, or partner you would want to have in your own life, and use any gaps you notice as further material for your own ongoing growth. Finally, understand that the standards of your environment will continue mattering throughout every stage of your life, not just during the initial period of building momentum. As your own standards rise, periodically reassess whether your current relationships and environments still match where you are headed, because growth is ongoing, and the environment that served you well at one stage may eventually need to evolve alongside you. This is not disloyalty. It is simply the natural, healthy consequence of continuing to grow rather than settling permanently into any single stage of development. Carry forward the understanding that this work of curating your environment is never truly finished, in the same way that none of the principles in this book reach a final completion point. As you grow, your definition of a high-standard relationship will naturally evolve as well, and periodically revisiting this question with fresh honesty keeps your environment aligned with the person you are actively becoming, rather than the person you were when you first started paying attention to who surrounds you. Chapter 10. Commit to lifelong growth and never stop improving. There is no finish line waiting for you at the end of this journey. No final destination where growth becomes unnecessary, and you can simply coast on what you have already built. This truth surprises and even disappoints some people, because they have been quietly hoping that success is a state you eventually arrive at and remain in permanently. The reality is different, and once you fully accept it, it becomes liberating rather than exhausting. Growth is not a phase you complete. It is a way of living that the top 1% commit to permanently, long after they have already achieved significant success by any reasonable external measure. Consider the pattern among people who have built extraordinary lives across nearly every field. Rarely do they stop growing once they reach a level that would satisfy most observers. They continue studying, continue refining their skills, continue seeking feedback, and continue pushing themselves into new areas of discomfort, long after external validation would have given them permission to relax. This is not because they are incapable of contentment. It is because they have discovered that the process of growth itself, not merely its outcomes, is where a significant portion of genuine fulfillment actually lives. Understand clearly the danger of treating any single achievement as a final destination. People who view success as an endpoint often experience a strange, disorienting emptiness once they finally reach the goal they spent years chasing, because the goal itself was never actually the true source of meaning. The true source of meaning was the person they were becoming throughout the pursuit, the discipline they built, the resilience they developed, the daily commitment to improvement that shaped their character along the way. When growth stops, this source of meaning stops with it, regardless of how impressive the achieved outcome looks from the outside. This principle has enormous practical implications for how you should approach every goal throughout your life. Rather than treating a specific financial target, career milestone, or personal achievement as the final purpose of your effort, treat it as one meaningful marker within a much longer, ongoing journey of growth. Celebrate the achievement genuinely when it arrives, because celebration matters and deserves real attention. But resist the temptation to treat that achievement as evidence that your growth work is now complete, because the moment you believe you have arrived, you begin the slow process of stagnation, even if that stagnation is not immediately visible. Real-world application of lifelong growth requires building specific systems and habits that keep improvement active regardless of your current level of success. Continue seeking honest feedback, even after you have achieved a level of competence that makes feedback feel less urgently necessary. Continue studying your field, even after you have accumulated significant expertise, because every field continues evolving, and the moment you stop learning is the moment your knowledge begins quietly becoming outdated. Continue setting new goals once previous ones have been achieved, ensuring that growth remains an active, ongoing practice, rather than something that only occurred during an earlier, less accomplished chapter of your life. Build a genuine practice of regular self-reflection, examining honestly where you have grown, where you have stagnated, and where new discomfort might be signaling an opportunity for further development. This reflection should happen consistently, not only during moments of crisis or dissatisfaction. Weekly or monthly reviews, where you honestly assess your progress across the areas that matter most to you. Keep growth active and intentional, rather than something that only happens accidentally, whenever life happens to force it upon you. Embrace the identity of a permanent student, regardless of how much expertise or success you have already accumulated. This mindset keeps you open to new information, new perspectives, and new methods, even when your existing approach has already produced significant results. The moment you begin believing you already know everything necessary within your field is the exact moment you become vulnerable to being overtaken by people who remained humble enough to keep learning. Genuine mastery, paradoxically, requires a permanent willingness to remain a student. Understand that lifelong growth requires ongoing discomfort, and this is precisely why so many people quietly abandon the practice once their initial goals have been achieved. Comfort feels good, and once a person has built genuine financial or professional stability, the natural temptation to settle into that comfort becomes powerful. Resisting this temptation does not mean rejecting all comfort or contentment. It means maintaining a portion of your life deliberately dedicated to continued growth, even while genuinely enjoying and appreciating the progress you have already made. Practice gratitude for how far you have already come, because growth without genuine appreciation eventually becomes exhausting and unsustainable. Many people caught in a cycle of constant striving forget to acknowledge their own progress, remaining perpetually dissatisfied, regardless of how much they achieve. Balance your commitment to continued growth with honest recognition of the distance you have already traveled. This balance, appreciation alongside ambition, sustains long-term motivation far more effectively than relentless dissatisfaction ever could. Recognize that setbacks will continue occurring throughout your entire life, regardless of how much you have already grown or achieved. Lifelong growth does not mean a life free from difficulty. It means developing an ever-increasing capacity to handle difficulty with clarity, resilience, and wisdom, drawing on everything you have already learned and built throughout your journey. Each new challenge, even later in life after significant success, becomes another opportunity to apply and deepen the principles you have been practicing all along. Mastering your mind, protecting your focus, thinking with an abundant mindset, building consistent habits, developing genuine discipline, taking calculated risks, learning from failure, protecting your time, and surrounding yourself with people who elevate your standards. Teach what you have learned to others as a natural extension of your own continued growth. Explaining a principle to someone else deepens your own understanding of it, revealing gaps in your knowledge that remained invisible while the understanding stayed only in your own head. Mentoring others, sharing your journey honestly, including its difficulties and failures, not just its highlight reel, creates a meaningful ripple effect, extending the impact of your own growth far beyond your individual life, while simultaneously reinforcing everything you have worked to build within yourself. As you close this book, understand that everything within these pages was never truly about becoming wealthy, in the narrow, purely financial sense of the word. It was about becoming the kind of person capable of building genuine wealth, in every meaningful sense: financial stability, resilient character, deep relationships, and a life built with intention rather than lived by default. This transformation does not complete itself the moment you finish reading. It begins, quietly and consistently, the moment you decide to apply even one principle from this book into your actual daily life, starting today. The top 1% are not a fixed group of people who were born into permanent advantage. They are, in a very real sense, simply people who committed, day after day, to the principles you have just spent this entire book exploring. That same commitment is fully available to you, starting immediately, regardless of your current circumstances, your past failures, or how far you currently feel from where you want to be. Choose today to become someone who never stops growing, and trust that this daily, consistent commitment, practiced faithfully over months and years, is exactly how extraordinary lives are actually built. One deliberate, disciplined day at a time. As you carry these 10 principles forward, resist the urge to try applying all of them perfectly at once. Meaningful transformation rarely happens through an overwhelming, simultaneous overhaul of every area of life. It happens through focused attention on one principle at a time, practiced consistently until it becomes genuinely natural, before deliberately layering in the next. Choose the single principle from this book that feels most urgently relevant to your current circumstances, and give that principle your full, sustained attention over the coming weeks, rather than spreading your effort thin across all 10 at once. Return to this book periodically, not as a single read completed and shelved, but as an ongoing reference you revisit at different stages of your journey. Principles that felt abstract during your first reading will likely land with far greater specificity once you have real experience applying them, and setbacks or successes you encounter along the way will illuminate these ideas in ways that a single initial reading simply cannot provide. Treat this material as a living companion to your growth, not a completed assignment. Remember also that your own growth, once it gains real momentum, becomes something worth sharing honestly with others navigating similar struggles. You do not need to wait until you feel completely accomplished before your experience becomes valuable to someone else. Often, the most helpful guidance comes from someone only a few steps ahead on the same path. Someone who remembers vividly what the earlier struggles actually felt like. As you apply these principles and experience real growth, consider how your own journey, including its difficulties, might genuinely serve someone else who is standing exactly where you once stood. The final truth worth carrying forward is simply this: you already possess everything necessary to begin this work today. Not a perfect mind, not unlimited motivation, not an absence of fear, but the raw, sufficient capacity to notice a thought, pause before a reaction, commit to a small habit, and take one honest step forward despite uncertainty. That capacity, exercised consistently and compounded patiently over time, is the true mindset of the top 1%, and it belongs to you the moment you decide, genuinely and repeatedly, to use it. End of audiobook. Before you close this book, take one final, honest moment with yourself. Of the 10 principles covered across these chapters, mastering your mind, building unbreakable focus, thinking like a millionaire, turning small habits into wealth, developing fierce discipline, overcoming fear, transforming failure into fuel, protecting your time, elevating your standards through relationships, and committing to lifelong growth, identify the single one that speaks most directly to where you currently stand. Not the one that sounds most impressive, but the one that, if practiced consistently starting tomorrow morning, would create the most meaningful shift in your actual daily life. Write that principle down somewhere you will see it regularly, not as a vague intention, but as a specific, actionable commitment. Attach a concrete first action to it, something small enough to complete within the next 24 hours. The distance between reading about transformation and actually experiencing it is almost always closed by this simple willingness to take one small, immediate action, rather than waiting for a more convenient moment that tends to never actually arrive. You were not given this book to become a slightly more informed version of who you already are. You were given these principles to become someone genuinely different, someone capable of the focus, the discipline, and the resilience that define every meaningful success story ever told. That transformation is not reserved for a fortunate few. It is available to anyone willing to practice these principles with honesty and consistency, starting today, starting now, starting with the very next decision you make after finishing this final page.